Let's start seated and we'll get our vertical requirement out of the way. With just a nice tall spine, nice, easy, fluid breath. Thinking about settling in. Not just to the physical shape, but to the physical space that you are within, the delicateness of your breath. And give ourselves about 60 more seconds here. And then let's exhale and let the chin fall down towards our sternum. Just tucking the chin and broadening the shoulders a little bit as we do so. And then we'll lift the chin towards the ceiling. Keep that same width and expansiveness across the shoulders. Think about the middle of the throat receiving our energy and our engagement. And then we'll bring our head back to neutral. Let's bring the hands together at heart center and just interlace the fingers, pushing the palms away from us if that's accessible, or keeping the palms toward us, but pushing the hands away if that feels better for the shoulders. And then either way, we're going to bring the wrist towards one another. So if we have the palms out, we're squeezing those wrists. If we have the palms in, we're squeezing the heels of the hands together. Just getting a little finger and wrist activation here. And then we'll relax that. Let's make sure that our left heel, is closest to the body, and bring the right foot out in front of us and just interweave the fingers between the toes. Just trying to craft a little space really for the plantar fascial tissue, but giving some space between those toes. And then if it's accessible to you, we'll lift and elevate that right leg, making sure that the ankle stays nice and active. And then just having that little finger toe interlace, we'll push the toe mound back. Again, wanting to ensure that we're keeping the ankle engaged. So we're not faulting back or forward here, just pushing that toe mound. And then we'll release the hand engagement with the toes and keep the ankle engaged again. Just see if you can bring that right hip just a little bit closer to the torso. And if this is low, right, we're just wherever we are, we're just kind of working with what the hip has available for us this morning. And then we'll relax that and switch our heel direction or heel placement. Interlacing the fingers now with the left foot. And making sure we space those toes out as much as is possible, and then giving a little lift to the ankle, pulling back on that toe mound or pushing back on that toe mound, really trying to activate this plantar fascial tissue in a way where we can feel some engagement there. And then we'll release that toe interlace and see if we can get just a little more lift here. And not uh, our most movement possibility because we haven't warmed up, but we're just kind of bringing in that hip engagement and seeing if we can feel some activity, some activation prior to getting things going. And then eventually we'll release that foot. Let's bring the bottoms of the feet together and just take ourselves forward into a little seated butterfly fold. Again, don't expect there to be a ton of room available. We haven't warmed up. We have this medial line restriction, but we're just going to what feels accessible and then listening to the body on what is and what isn't accessible this morning. And we'll just give ourselves about 15 more seconds here. And we'll walk ourselves up into a nice vertical seat. Let's transition to hands and knees tabletop. Just a little bit of play with the spine before we head up the wall here. So setting up your base position with an exhale, find your way into your cat shape. Get that big, full flexion of the spinal column. Think about really finding and creating the apex in the middle of the spine. And then drop the belly, lift the tailbone, lift the chin. Reversing the shape, feeling the middle of the spine and how it is receiving this extension now. And then we'll reverse back into our flexion. Chin tucks. Shoulder blades round, middle of the back rounds, tailbone rounds, everything into that middle space. Exhale, we'll drop the belly. Inhale, belly pulls up, middle of the back arches, shoulders arch, tailbone tucks. And one more time, reverse, drop that belly. Lift the tailbone, lift the chin, keep the width across the shoulders. Feel that softness there. Relax back into child's pose. And we'll give ourselves just 15 more seconds here. And when it feels appropriate, let's pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. And let's find our way to our wall. So we'll start with a traditional legs up the wall, tucking the tailbone into the corner and just letting those feet extend straight up, looking kind of to utilize the hip and toe space or bottom of the foot space that we crafted. And then letting your arms just come into a shape that feels supportive of the shoulders here. I like the cat cow transition into a legs up the wall. I think it really gives you some good insight into how your spine is maybe not optimally aligned. Those areas of extra sensation here can be really good points of awareness around what might need a little bit more integration. Just cycle those deep breaths. There's a lot of good stuff that happens in legs up the wall. So I'll just kind of check in on those key points. I think it's nice to just remind yourself because there are so many good things, right? So we're getting that spinal reset. We have that really nice neutrality. We have the hip hinge, which takes off some of the pressure of the assuming we have the hamstring space, right? So if you're feeling restriction in the hamstring, the knees bend and that alleviates that. We have to kind of work with what the body has to make all of this most beneficial. And so if legs being fully extended isn't appropriate for your hamstrings, we bend the knees and we receive so that the hip hinge offers some general ease between the transition of the upper and lower body. And then the probably more spoken about advantage of having the legs up the walls. Our body is really designed to efficiently pump blood against gravity. Right? So get blood from the bottom of our body back to the heart, which more or less sits in that upper third of the body. And so when we reverse our position, that efficiency has like an exponential return, right? Because now we're working with gravity and the blood flow can get back to the center point, the heart point, very easily. System's designed to pump up, which is now down. So that's very easy. We have a little bit of a change in the way the blood flows as our system is not remarkably efficient at pumping blood down, right? It uses gravity to make that happen. And that's why you can start to feel, it's potentially possible you start to feel some tingling sensation, some decreased blood flow in the lower extremities, which are now above us. So if that's happening, again, the solution has been the knees. Bring the legs closer to the heart and let that system have to produce less energy to make that possible. So there's this Roman consul, and he's sitting in his villa in his ancestor room. And all the great wealthy Roman families had ancestor rooms. That's even not. All of the land owning Romans had ancestor rooms. An ancestor room was a room of literal death masks of your lineage. And so, as a consul, you would expect that there were many masks. And in this room, there certainly were. This was a massive room filled with these masks. Let's give ourselves just about 30 more seconds here in this primary shape. And then we will let the knees fall to the left. Let the legs fall to the left would be a better way to describe that. The knees will follow. And we're looking here to keep that right shoulder pretty anchored. Sometimes this will have some pretty impactful sensation across that right hip flexor. Kind of using that hip space we offered when we lifted our leg at the beginning of class. And this is a shape we won't stay in too terribly long. But try to relax into the rotation here. And when it feels appropriate, let's bring our legs back up to that neutral spinal alignment. Take a moment just to feel the back relax into this space. And then let's let the legs fall out wide. And so we get this external hip rotation. Really nice way to change the angle of the hips, and feel how your spine responds to that angle change. Those deep, fluid inhales and exhales. And we'll bring our legs back towards that middle space and let both knees fall over to, or legs fall over to your second side, landing there, grounding there, feeling that opposite shoulder anchor you. And so as this console's looking around this room, there's a knock on the door, and the door opens. Someone leans their head in and says, "It's time." Consul walks out. He gets in a chariot. He's up on the hill where his villa is. He's looking down over Rome, and the streets of Rome are absolutely, they're filled with people. And they're all there to celebrate him. The Roman Senate has declared a triumph in his honor. And it's hard to fully articulate the importance of a triumph in Roman society. I've used descriptors of like all of the biggest concerts and all of the biggest sporting events all rolled into one experience, but that's not quite enough. And so the best way that I think I can describe the import of a triumph in Roman society is to give this little antidote. Antidote? Give this little example. And we'll bring our legs back to neutral. And one more time, we're going to let the legs fall out wide. So there was a time when the Roman Senate offered Caesar the choice between a triumph and becoming a consul. Consul is essentially an equivalent to becoming president of the United States. And they gave him this choice because they expected him to choose the triumph. That's how highly sought after these triumphs were in Roman society. Caesar, being who he was, declined the triumph. But that is a completely different story. And so, with the entirety of Rome there to celebrate this consul's triumph, the experience of a triumph is showing the Roman public the spoils of your conquests, showing the art and the gold and the riches and the captives that you've collected for Rome, and to have the people celebrate what you've done. And so this consul has these grand displays in what is essentially a parade through the Republic. Let's give ourselves 30 more seconds here. And then we'll bring the legs together. Bend your right knee so that the bottom of the right foot can more or less connect with the wall. And then let's give ourselves a little bit of additional compression on that right hip, interlacing the fingers over the right shin or hamstring and squeezing down into that hip capsule. And then release the left hand and let the right hand guide your right leg out wide. Now, you have some unique options here because of the way we have this set up. You can use your right arm underneath your right thigh to offer some support. You can bring that right thigh all the way down to the floor and then use the right arm on top of the thigh to help peel additional space in. Or you can use the wall to just kind of offer up a half place that feels appropriate for your hip. So we're choosing a place here that we can use this asymmetrical inverted shape to really benefit, really expand the physicality of that trunk space, that mid-body space. And so the first spoils, the first collection, the first display that this consul is showing is what he captured in Gaul. Gaul is a geographical region that we would think of as Germany and France today. But the ancient Romans thought of as this terrifying space in the north, full of these terrifying barbarians. And there were not many things, many people that Roman legions were scared of, but the Gallic people certainly brought fear, not just to the citizens of Rome, but to the legions of Rome as well. We'll let that right leg extend back up and mirror the left here. And now we may feel some asymmetry across the backside of our body, across the hips, across the legs. That is a big, deep external rotation we're coming out of. Just think about finding your way back to neutral. And then bend both knees so that we get just a nice little hip and lumbar reset. And then let's extend the right leg up the wall. We'll compress that left leg into the hip capsule, over the shin or over the hamstring with the hands, and just squeezing in. And then we'll release that and let the left knee fall out wide. So we offer again, the left arm can offer support underneath, the left arm can energize down, or you can use the foot on the wall to find kind of a mid space where you get the most benefit for your practice this morning. And so there are these great stories of battles between Roman legions and Gallic barbarians, Gallic tribes, or the Gauls would start these war drums and these chants. And the sounds they would create would be enough to terrify these Roman armies. But from time to time, the Roman armies would also be able to outflank them, would be able to overrun them. And there are times when the Gallic tribes, the Gallic armies, would retreat from the Roman onslaught. And there are all these stories of how terrifying the Gallic people were. The women back in camp, the wives of these warriors, they would attack their own tribe. They would attack their own husbands for retreating, try to send them back into war against these Roman armies. This consul had won many battles against the Gallic tribes, and therefore he had captured many of their great artifacts and brought them back to Rome, and here they were on display. And as each item kind of pops up, as this consul sees these Gallic artifacts, this man in the back of his chariot leans forward and whispers into his ear, "Memento mori." We'll let that left leg return back to mirror the right. And then we'll pull both thighs in towards the rib cage for a little hip and lumbar reset. And then when it feels appropriate, let's transition from the wall back into a horizontal space, letting our body just be receptive to the mat underneath us, letting the blood flow normalize. And then eventually letting the bottoms of the feet come together and the knees fall out wide. We'll give ourselves just 40 more seconds here. And we'll bring our knees back together at neutral. And walk the feet out to the width of the mat and let the knees fall together. Again, resetting the hips, resetting the lumbar. And so they leave the Gallic treasures and they move on to the next. And after each treasure that this console goes by, the voice from the back of the chariot leans forward and whispers, Memento Mori. Last 30 seconds here. Oh. Bring the knees out to the width of the ankles, then walk the ankles and knees back in line with the hips, and exhale, let your knees fall over to the left. Inhale back to neutral, and exhale over to the right. Inhale back to neutral. Now keep your right leg where it is and let your left knee fall out wide. The real goal here is we've already had a similar asymmetrical shape. We had a lot more potential for lateral expansion in the previous shape. This shape is more focused on the sacrum. And what I want you to try to do is really think about the sacrum being neutral and level. So instead of allowing that right hip to lift and work towards the left side, I want you to really think about the right hip being anchored down so that you are fully neutral, even in the asymmetrical external rotation on that left hip. And then the right knee will fall on top of the left. And then we'll inhale both knees to neutral. And the right knee will fall open, the left knee will stay as is. Thinking about level across the hips, across the ilium, across the sacrum. And so eventually this triumph comes up to the apex of the show. Think about how we can really adjust and balance the weight distribution across the back side of the body here. And then let your left knee fall on top of the right. And so the biggest score came from Macedonia or Macadamia, depending on if you're using the more ancient or more modern pronunciation. Macedonia was a phenomenally wealthy state. And so this consul's conquests brought back untold riches that were now on display. We'll bring our knees back to neutral. Let the bottoms of the feet fall together or come together and the knees fall out wide one last time. And so there are these giant gold statues and piles and piles full of gold coins on display. And each time they pass one of these, that voice from the back of the chariot leans forward and whispers into this consul's ear, Memento Mori. This consul sees this captured figure, this former Macedonian king, in this cage on display for the Romans to look at. And he has this flashback of their experience together. We'll bring the knees back to neutral. Let both knees fall over towards the right. And we'll settle in here. And so their two armies had lined up, prepared for battle, and kind of a show of aggression before this Roman consul sent over some emissaries to offer a opportunity for this Macedonian king to surrender. This Macedonian king was an incredibly wealthy and incredibly powerful person. And he had shown so, he had demonstrated by the show of his army. Even so, they were greatly outnumbered by the Romans. At the same time, he was used to a certain level of respect, a certain level of influence. And so he sent the Roman emissaries back to tell this consul he needed more time to think. When the consul received this message, let's inhale and bring our knees back to neutral. And then we'll exhale and let both knees fall over towards the left. When the consul received this message, he got up from his table, his chair. He left the Roman camp. He walked by himself into the Macedonian camp. He walked straight up to this Macedonian king, took his walking stick, and drew a circle around his feet. Looked him square in the eye and said, "Make your decision before you leave that circle." And this Roman consul is snapped out of that little memory by the voice in the back of his chariot, leaning forward and whispering into his ear, Memento Mori. When you feel balanced, when you feel ready, we'll bring our knees back to neutral. We'll ask ourselves if there's anything we might want, need, or benefit from prior to Shavasana. And if there is, we'll offer that to ourselves now. If we have everything we need, we'll settle into a shape where we can appreciate some physical stillness for Shavasana. So treasure after treasure that the console passes. That voice from the back leans forward and whispers memento mori. Remember you are mortal. And every single triumph had this person. Their only job to whisper, remember you are mortal, into the celebrated's ear. Let's bring some movement into our fingers and our toes, into our wrists and our ankles, with the intention of offering the celebrated the opportunity to fully appreciate the experience you are having, up into the knees, elbows, shoulders, hips, neck, head, jaw, eyes. Eventually, the entirety of our body will move, and we'll utilize that movement to transition from the shapes we are in back into a seat. In the seated space, our spine will get tall, our breath will get fluid, and our eyes will close. Because even through all of their unbridled ambition, the Romans understood that we cannot fully appreciate the experience we're having here today without that awareness. Your next inhale, we'll bring our hands together, heart center. Over the course of the next 7 days, can you be that voice in the back of the chariot, constantly reminding yourself to remember you are mortal, and see how that impacts your experience? Thank you so much for being a part of this morning's practice and for being you. Namaste. Sunday, guys. Appreciate the heck out of you being here. I'll be back tomorrow night if you want to move. If not, I hope you have a beautiful week. I love the heck out of you. I'll see you soon. Mwah.